In May 2021, the number of migrants crossing the U.S. southern border was higher than it's been in 2 decades. According to U.S. Customs and Border Protection, over 180,000 migrants were apprehended, a 78% increase since February. Included in that number, almost 14,000 unaccompanied children needing care and shelter while Health and Human Services searched for family members or sponsors in the United States.
The number of children arriving to the border has been really high, and it's so painful to see the stories of families. They will do whatever it takes.
They pay a coyote, a smuggler, to cross them. They are paying human traffickers.
Our lack of a legal immigration system is really only benefiting the cartels, quite frankly.
After a dip in immigration at the southern border due to the coronavirus pandemic, the surge of migrants in 2021 has already surpassed recent records. So why are so many risking everything to flee their home countries? And what does the U.S. government need to do to address this crisis at the border?
So imagine you are a taxi driver in Honduras. In order to run your taxi business, you have to pay, quote, rent to the local gang. If you cannot pay rent, that gang is going to kill you and or your family. So what happens? You have to pay another gang, a smuggling cartel, to get you out of the country and to the US-Mexico border. You oftentimes are kidnapped and held for ransom along the way.
Nobody wants to leave their family, their country, even less to leave their children to take this risky journey. But it is to die in their home countries or to at least try to provide them for a better future.
Many migrants and nearly all unaccompanied minors at the border are traveling from some of the poorest countries in Central America, known as the Northern Triangle. The Northern Triangle is made up of Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras. The region has been plagued by civil wars, extreme poverty, and widespread violence. And according to the UN, El Salvador has the highest homicide rates in the world.
There is no easy solution to migration because it's the interaction of different vulnerabilities. The violence, the lack of opportunities, the vulnerability to natural disasters.
Some migrants band together in large caravans, walking over 1,000 miles for weeks on end to reach the U.S. border. Others spend thousands of dollars to hire a coyote.
A coyote is a person that will get a payment for taking a person from any of the countries to the U.S. border.
It's the cartels and the smuggling networks who are putting word on the streets across the region that you pay us $6,000 to $10,000 a pop, we're going to get you and or your child to the US-Mexico border because the border is open.
I'm told by law enforcement at the border that these smugglers have sophisticated networks. You're not just talking about one person at the border, that they can get on the phone and call people who have eyes everywhere and tell them when the coast is clear. I mean, they're running up against sophisticated military operations, and yet they're still able to combat that technology successfully and cross thousands of people every day.
They will sell them the idea that their children will be safe, that they will protect them, but it's not truth. The truth is that at the very first, sign of danger for themselves, for the coyotes themselves, they will abandon the children, wherever they are.
Huh? ¿Qué pasó?
This 10-year-old Nicaraguan boy was left behind by the group he was traveling with.
Tal vez me pueden robar, secuestrar o algo. ¿Te pueden robar? ¿Tienes miedo?
Border Patrol took him to the Donna Detention Center, where he was housed with more than 3,000 other migrant children in early April. For many migrants, crossing the Rio Grande marks the last leg of a harrowing journey. But the road to asylum is just beginning.
We're talking about dusty, dark roads. We're talking about brush. We're talking about crossing the border in the dark of night. We came across 2 young little boys. One of them had a phone number written inside a pink hat. Another little boy had a phone number written inside on his pants. The hope for these little boys is that once they come across the border, that they can turn to the Border Patrol and say, I'm seeking asylum, help me make contact with these family members whose phone numbers are on our clothes. You know, I'll tell you, I've covered a lot of sad stories, and that particular moment of seeing one of the little boys who had a phone number still legible after this long journey from Honduras, but the other little boy, that number had already faded. I had to step away from the interview because it really hit you in your soul. I don't know how authorities will be able to track down this little boy's family. He certainly wasn't old enough to have memorized that number by himself. I don't even know if he knew his entire name.
Every year around spring, when the weather turns, we see this kind of a flow to the U.S.-Mexico border. Even over the Trump administration, we still saw very large numbers of unaccompanied children and families looking to seek asylum here in the United States.
What's been different this spring is that there hasn't been enough shelter capacity for arriving children. So the federal government had situations where there were very serious overcrowding at Customs and Border Protection.
Even supporters of this administration say that they were not prepared for what happened, that they came in and were so adamant about calling the Trump administration's immigration policies immoral, and they moved so quickly to overturn so much of the Trump administration's policies that they didn't think far enough ahead and in advance to what that would look like on the actual border when they changed those policies.
There was a need to act very quickly and very urgently to expand capacity. And one of the things that they've done is turn to what are now called emergency intake sites.
One of these sites was shut down following allegations of inadequate living conditions, including that migrant girls were forced to spend all day indoors on cots in overcrowded and understaffed shelters.
Ultimately, finding ways to safely speed the process of releasing children to parents or other relatives is really crucial.
While the Biden administration works to streamline the process, in May there were still over 20,000 migrant children in CBP custody or HHS care. The rise in children and families seeking asylum at the border has added to a tremendous backlog of cases. In 2019, that backlog hit a record high with over 1 million cases waiting to be heard. Since then, they've increased to 1.3 million. And while the Biden administration did roll back some of Trump's immigration policies, they left in place one of the most restrictive, effectively closing the U.S. border to nearly all asylum seekers.
Right now, under Title 42 restrictions, single adults who are apprehended at the border are expelled. They're not put into a detention or deportation process. Their cases are not heard by the immigration courts. In essence, they are turned around. For families with children of a tender age, those families are allowed into the U.S. and are moved through the immigration court system.
The administration has made clear that it is moving away from what's sometimes referred to as the Remain in Mexico program. Its formal name is Migrant Protection Protocols.
The Migrant Protection Protocols is slowly being unwound. So those families are working with UNHCR and then with Customs and Border Protection to intentionally and carefully enter the United States and ensure their cases are being heard.
Also being unwound, the family separation policy. While the Biden administration has located the families of at least 60 children who were separated at the border under the Trump administration, they are still searching for hundreds more.
Part of what the Biden administration struggles with is that the Trump administration, did a number of things to restrict the borders that many people believed were illegal. And so just the process of trying to follow the law again becomes in itself controversial.
For more than 30 years, politicians have talked about immigration reform, and we've done nothing about it. It's time to fix it.
Vice President Kamala Harris was tasked with leading efforts to address the surge of people migrating from South and Central America. Harris received criticism on her first foreign trip as vice president after delivering a warning to anyone considering making the journey to the U.S.
Do not come do not come. The United States will continue to enforce our laws and secure our border.
Harris also discussed ways to increase economic opportunity and bolster change inside the Northern Triangle.
Our responsibility and our capacity is to give people a sense of hope.
It has to transcend, to go beyond specific administrations, but to be country plans to address the root causes. It requires the empowerment, the ownership of the governments of Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras to make a difference in the life of their people.
I think that the Biden administration should expedite their efforts to establish in-region refugee processing centers so that whether it's a family or a minor, they can apply for asylum protection in the region. That is a short-term solution that could have an incredible impact on the safety of lives and on disrupting the insidious networks that the cartels have established.
Migration is a complex situation, but there is hope for people if there are opportunities to thrive, to get educated, to find a decent job, to have access to basic services. Migration is not the only option. It shouldn't be the only option.
Hi everyone, George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.